Quran chapter 77, Surah Al-Mursalāt. By Sayyid Qutb. Translation by Muhammad Al-Amrani. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. By the winds sent forth in succession, and the raging storms that blow violently, by the ones scattering far and wide, and those that separate with precision, and by those that bring down reminders, as a mercy or as a warning. Indeed, what you are promised shall come to pass. When the stars are blotted out, when the heavens are torn asunder, when the mountains are blown away, when the messengers are gathered at their appointed time, for which day are they delayed? For the day of judgment. And what can make you understand what the day of judgment is? Woe on that day to the deniers! Did we not destroy those of old, then follow them with those who came later? Thus do we deal with the guilty. Woe on that day to the deniers! Did we not create you from a humble fluid, and placed it in a secure resting place for a known term? So we determined. How excellent is our determination! Woe on that day to the deniers! Did we not make the earth a cradle, for both the living and the dead? And we set firm, towering mountains upon it, and gave you pure, sweet water to drink. Woe on that day to the deniers! Proceed now to what you used to deny. Proceed to a shadow of 3 columns that offers no shade nor protection from the blaze. Verily it throws sparks as huge as castles, as if they were yellow camels. Woe on that day to the deniers! This is the day when they will not speak, nor will they be given permission to offer excuses. Woe on that day to the deniers! This is the day of judgment. We have gathered you and those before you, so if you have any plans, make them now. Woe on that day to the deniers! Verily, the righteous will be in shade and springs, and they will have fruits from whatever they desire. Eat and drink with joy for what you used to do. Verily, this is how we reward those who do good. Woe on that day to the deniers! But eat and enjoy yourselves for a little while, for you are sinners. Woe on that day to the deniers! And when it is said to them, bow down, they do not bow. Woe on that day to the deniers! So in what message after this will they believe? This chapter strikes with sharp intensity, with scenes that are fierce and rhythms that resonate like lashes of fire. It stands the heart before a solemn trial, confronting it with a barrage of questions, rejections and warnings that pierce through like sharpened arrows. It presents before the mind visions of this world and the next, truths of the universe and the soul, and sights of horror and punishment. After every scene, it scorches the guilty heart, as though touched by the flames of woe on that day to the deniers. This refrain is repeated 10 times throughout the chapter, becoming the pulse of its rhythm, perfectly aligned with the chapter's sharp features, fierce imagery and intense cadence. It reminds us of the repeated refrain in the chapter Ar-Rahman, "Then which of the favours of your sustainer will you deny?" as well as the repeated line in Al-Qamar, "So how severe were my punishment and my warnings?" The repetition here lends the chapter its unique flavour, giving it a distinct sharpness. The chapter flows with short, rapid and intense passages with varying rhymes. Each passage has its own rhyme, with the rhythm returning to certain rhymes over and over. The heart is struck by each passage with its unique sting and force, one after the other, never allowing a moment to rest before the next impact arrives with the same severity. From the opening, the atmosphere is stormy and turbulent, whether we envision the winds or the angels in by the winds sent forth in succession. The chapter opens with a tone perfectly aligned with its theme and mood. The Qur'an often frames scenes in a unique way within certain chapters, using the atmosphere and intensity of these scenes to construct a compelling frame for the entire chapter. Just as it uses the quiet tranquility of dawn and nightfall in Ad-Duha to frame scenes of care and protection, or the thunderous galloping in Al-Adiyat to depict the scattering of graves and the revealing of hearts, this chapter stands as a powerful example of that method. Each of the chapter's 10 passages represents a journey into a new world, where the chapter itself transforms into vast expanses of reflections, emotions and responses that far exceed the limitations of the words themselves. Like arrows, these verses point to countless realms beyond. The first scene unfolds with glimpses of the Day of Judgment. It portrays the colossal upheavals in the heavens and the earth, the appointed time when the messengers will account for their people, when the stars are dimmed, and when the sky is split asunder, and when the mountains are blown away, and when the messengers are brought to their time. For what day has this been delayed? For the day of decision. And what will make you understand what the day of decision is? Woe on that day to the deniers. The second scene takes us to the downfall of past generations, pointing to the way of God with those who deny the truth. Did we not destroy the former ones? Then we made those who followed after them. Thus do we deal with the guilty. Woe on that day to the deniers. The third scene reflects upon the first creation and the precision it reveals. Did we not create you from a humble fluid? Then place it in a secure resting place for an appointed term? And we determined it. How excellent are we in determination! Woe on that day to the deniers. The fourth scene speaks of the earth, which embraces its inhabitants in life and death, and has been prepared with stability and life-giving water. Did we not make the earth a cradle for both the living and the dead, and set upon it lofty, firm mountains, and gave you sweet, refreshing water to drink? Woe on that day to the deniers. The fifth scene addresses the deniers and the punishment they will face on the day of decision. Go forth to that which you used to deny. Go to the shadow of 3 columns that provides no shade nor protection from the flame. Indeed, it throws sparks like castles, as if they were yellow camels. Woe on that day to the deniers. The sixth and seventh scenes continue with the reproach and scorn for the deniers. This is the day they will not speak, nor will they be allowed to offer excuses. Woe on that day to the deniers. This is the day of decision. We have gathered you and those before you. So if you have any plans, make them now. Woe on that day to the deniers. The eighth scene shifts to the righteous and the blessings that await them. Indeed, the God-conscious will be in shades and springs, and fruits from whatever they desire. Eat and drink in satisfaction for what you used to do. Indeed, this is how we reward the doers of good. Woe on that day to the deniers. The ninth scene returns briefly to the deniers with further condemnation. Eat and enjoy yourselves for a little while, for you are sinners. Woe on that day to the deniers. The 10th and final scene again condemns the deniers in their rejection, and when it is said to them, bow down, they do not bow. Woe on that day to the deniers. The conclusion comes after all these scenes, with the final blow of reproach and questioning. So in what message after this will they believe? Thus the heart races along with the swift rhythm of the Surah, panting with its imagery and its unfolding events. Although the themes in the Surah repeat those found in many other Meccan revelations, the Qur'an presents these truths from different angles, with varied nuances, flavors and emotional tones, in line with the different psychological states it addresses and the hearts it seeks to reach. Hence, these truths always appear fresh, evoking new responses within the soul. In this surah, there is a distinct portrayal of the scenes of hellfire, as well as a new intensity in confronting the deniers. The style of presentation and address throughout is unique, giving the surah a sharp, biting character and a breathless, urgent rhythm. Now let us reflect on the surah in its Quranic context in detail. By the winds sent forth in succession, then the raging storms that blow violently, by the ones scattering far and wide, then those that separate with precision, and by those that bring down reminders as a plea or a warning. Verily, what you are promised is bound to happen. The central theme here is the resurrection, a reality the disbelievers found difficult to grasp. The Qur'an, in various passages, repeatedly affirms this truth to instill its certainty in their hearts. Belief in the last day is foundational to faith and essential for reshaping human life and values. Thus, much effort was needed to establish this truth firmly in minds and hearts. In the opening of this surah, God swears that the promise of the hereafter is indeed a reality. The very form of this oath evokes the sense that what God swears by is part of the hidden realms, forces veiled from human perception, yet profoundly influencing the cosmos and human life. The early generations of interpreters differed in understanding its true meaning. Some said it refers to the winds, while others said it refers to the angels. Still, others believed that some verses refer to the winds, while others to the angels, reflecting the ambiguity of these expressions and their meanings. Such mystery is fitting for an oath concerning the unseen realities which lie within God's knowledge, and just as those unseen forces are real and impactful, so too is this promised event. As for the verse, by those sent forth in succession, Abu Huraira said it refers to the angels. This was also narrated from Masruq, Abu al-Duha and Mujahid in one of his reports, as well as from Al-Sudi, Al-Rabi ibn Anas and Abu Salih. Here the meaning would be an oath by the angels sent in succession, resembling the flowing mane of a horse in their continual and orderly dispatch. Similarly, Abu Salih interpreted the raging storms, the scatterers, the distinguishers and the reminders as referring to the angels. Ibn Masud, on the other hand, said that by those sent forth in succession refers to the winds sent in steady succession, like the flowing mane of a horse. He held the same view regarding the raging storms and the scatterers. This interpretation was also shared by Ibn Abbas, Mujahid, Qatada and Abu Salih in one narration. Al-Tabari paused on the verse, uncertain whether it referred to angels or winds, but was firm in stating that the raging storms are the winds, as are the scatterers, which spread the clouds across the horizons of the sky. Regarding the verses, those that distinguish clearly and those that deliver a reminder, Ibn Masud interpreted these to mean the angels. This view was shared by Ibn Abbas, Masruq, Mujahid, Qatada, Al-Rabi ibn Anas, Al-Sudi and Al-Thawri without dispute. These angels descend by God's command upon the messengers, distinguishing between truth and falsehood and delivering divine revelation that either serves as a plea to mankind or as a warning. We can observe that the tone of grandeur and mystery is evident in the matters by which God swears, similar to the tone in other surahs like by the scattering winds and by those who pull out with force. This variation in interpretation only underscores the obscurity of the terms and their meanings, and this ambiguity is a deliberate element in their placement here. The elusive suggestion carried by these oaths is the most evident feature of this passage. These verses in themselves stir an emotional tremor, their sound and rhythm creating a deep impression, casting immediate shadows. The shock and trembling they induce in the soul are most suited to the theme and direction of the surah. Every verse following these oaths is a jolt, as if one were seized by the collar, shaken violently, and interrogated over a crime or a manifest sign they deny, only to be let go with a dire warning. Woe on that day to the deniers. Then comes the mighty shock of the cosmic upheavals on the day of judgment, the appointed time when the messengers will present the outcome of their mission to all of humanity. When the stars are dimmed, when the sky is split asunder, when the mountains are blown away, when the messengers are gathered at their appointed time, for what day has this been delayed? For the day of decision. And what will make you comprehend what the day of decision is? Woe on that day to the deniers. On that day the stars will be extinguished, their light will vanish, the sky will be torn apart, and the mountains will be reduced to dust, blown away as if they had never existed. These scenes of cosmic collapse are described in numerous places throughout the Qur'an, all of which indicate the disintegration of the visible universe, accompanied by thunderous crashes, roars and explosions, events far beyond human experience, events which make the disasters people now dread, such as earthquakes, volcanoes and storms, seem trivial by comparison. These are but the trifles of children's games when measured against the horrors of the day of decision. Just as a child's firecracker compares to the atomic and hydrogen bombs, yet even this comparison falls short. For the terror that will result from the explosion and scattering of this entire cosmos is beyond the capacity of human imagination to grasp. Alongside the cosmic upheavals, this surah presents yet another momentous matter deferred to this day. when the messengers are summoned to render their final account. The divine call throughout the ages, God's invitation on earth, now reaches its ultimate conclusion. The messengers have been appointed for this day, the day of reckoning, where they will present the final tally of their mission. This monumental task outweighs the heavens, the earth, and the mountains. It is the moment when all unresolved matters of earthly life will be decided, when God's judgment will be rendered and the final word declared, putting an end to the generations and centuries past. The language of the Surah magnifies this immense reality, hinting at the staggering significance of this event, so overwhelming that it transcends human comprehension. And when the messengers are gathered, for what day have they been appointed? For the day of decision. And what will make you comprehend what the day of decision is? It is clear from the tone of expression that this speaks of a grand, awe-inspiring matter. As this resounding proclamation reaches the senses in all its majesty and terror, eclipsing even the horror of darkened stars, the cleaving sky and the pulverized mountains, the mighty, fearful warning follows. Woe on that day to the deniers. This warning, issued from the Almighty and the All-Powerful, resounds against the backdrop of universal upheaval and the solemn assembly of judgment in the presence of the messengers as they present their final accounts. This warning in this moment carries a weight and impact that shakes the soul to its core. From this awe-inspiring scene on the day of decision, the Surah takes us on a journey to the destruction of the ancients, the fate of past generations. Did we not destroy the former peoples, then we will follow them with the later ones. Thus do we deal with the criminals. Woe on that day to the deniers. In one swift stroke the fate of the former generations is revealed, mighty multitudes, and in a single blow the fate of the latter generations is laid bare. Equally vast multitudes. Across the expanse of time and space, the ruins and remains of these people appear, and before this vision the threat of destruction rings out, proclaiming God's enduring law in creation. Thus do we deal with the criminals. It is an immutable law, unchanged by time. And as the sinners await their fate, like the fate of those who came before them, the pronouncement of doom descends upon them. Woe on that day to the deniers. From the ruins of past civilizations, the Surah shifts to the mystery of creation and life itself, with its intricate design and divine purpose. Whether in the small or the great, did we not create you from a humble fluid and placed it in a secure place for an appointed term? Thus did we determine, and how excellent is our power to determine. Woe on that day to the deniers. This is a journey through the wondrous stages of embryonic development. Condensed here into a few profound strokes, a humble fluid is placed in the secure womb, carried to a preordained destiny, to a defined time. At each stage of this miraculous creation, the perfect order of divine wisdom is manifest, governing every phase with precision. Before this flawless design, the Surah echoes its sublime commentary. Thus did we determine, and how excellent is our power to determine. And before this meticulous decree, the familiar warning returns. Woe on that day to the deniers. The Surah then takes us on a journey across the earth to reflect on God's providence for human life, and how he endowed the world with the elements that sustain it. Did we not make the earth a cradle, both for the living and the dead? And we set upon it lofty mountains and gave you sweet water to drink. Woe on that day to the deniers. Did we not make the earth an embrace for its children, both the living and the dead? And we set upon it towering mountains, firm and majestic, upon whose summits clouds gather and from which flow the waters of life. Could this be anything other than the work of supreme power, precise wisdom and perfect design? And after all this, how could the deniers still reject the truth? Woe on that day to the deniers. Now, after these vivid portrayals, after the soul has been filled with the impressions they cast upon the heart, the Surah abruptly shifts to the scene of judgment and recompense. Here we hear the dreadful command issued to the criminal deniers, directing them to their punishment which they had so arrogantly dismissed. Now confronted with bitter reproach and agonizing torment, proceed to that which you denied. proceed to a shadow of 3 branches, which is neither cool nor protective from the flame. It sends forth sparks as large as castles, as if they were yellow camels. Woe on that day to the deniers! Go forth, released after your long detention on the day of decision. But to where? It is a release worse than captivity. Proceed to that which you denied, for now it lies before you, visible and undeniable. Proceed to a shadow of 3 branches, but it is the shadow of the smoke of hell, whose flames rise in 3 directions. Yet it is a shadow worse than the burning heat, neither cool nor protective from the flame. It is a suffocating, scorching heat. The very term shadow here is but a mockery, a cruel illusion of relief, when in truth it only leads to the searing blaze of hell. Go forth! You surely know where to go. You know well the destination to which you are being driven. There is no need to mention its name. It hurls sparks as great as palaces, as if they were yellow camels. The sparks follow one another, the size of a stone house. For the Arabs, the word casa referred to any house made of stone, not necessarily the grand palaces we think of today. And these sparks, in their succession, appear like yellow camels, wandering here and there. This is merely the spark. What then of the fire from which these sparks are cast? At the very moment when the senses are overwhelmed by this terror, the familiar refrain follows. Woe on that day to those who deny. Then, after presenting the material horror in the image of hell, the surah completes the scene by portraying the psychological horror that imposes silence and suppression. This is a day when they will not speak, nor will they be permitted to offer excuses. Here, the terror lies in the dreadful silence, the overwhelming suppression, and the awe-inspiring humility. No word is spoken, no excuse is allowed. The time for argument has passed, the moment for excuses is long gone. Woe on that day to those who deny. In other scenes of the Qur'an, their regret, remorse and pleas are mentioned. For the day is long, as Ibn Abbas, may God be pleased with him, said, there will be both this and that. But here, this terrifying silent moment is depicted, fitting the context and tone of the passage. This is the day of decision. We have gathered you and the former generations. So if you have any scheme, then scheme against me. Woe on that day to those who deny. This is the day of decision, not the day of apology. We have gathered you and all those who came before you together. If you have any plan, then execute it. If you have any power, then use it. But there is no plan, no power, only the silent anguish amidst the bitter rebuke. Woe on that day to those who deny. When the scene of reproach for the criminals has concluded, the discourse turns to the honour bestowed upon the righteous. Indeed, the righteous will be in shade and springs, and fruits from whatever they desire. Eat and drink in contentment for what you used to do. Indeed, thus do we reward the doers of good. Woe on that day to those who deny. The righteous will be in true shade, real shade this time, not the shade of smoke with 3 branches, neither cool nor protective from the flames. They will be amidst springs of water, not suffocating smoke that intensifies thirst and heat. And they will enjoy fruits from whatever they desire, all the while receiving the highest form of honour and grace from their sustainer in full view and hearing of all. Eat and drink in contentment for what you used to do. Indeed, thus do we reward the doers of good. Oh, the sweetness of this divine reward from the Most High, the Almighty. Woe on that day to those who deny. In contrast to this bliss and honour, the scene shifts back to life on earth, in a sudden, brief glimpse of the fleeting worldly life that has now been folded away in the narrative. We return to the earth once more, where the criminals are subjected to scorn and humiliation. Eat and enjoy yourselves for a little while, indeed you are criminals. Woe on that day to those who deny. Thus, the worldly life is intertwined with the hereafter in 2 consecutive passages, as if both moments, the temporal and the eternal, are presented side by side. Though separated by ages upon ages, the 2 scenes seem as though they exist in the same time. While the address was directed at the righteous in the hereafter, now it is directed at the criminals in this world, as if to say, behold the stark difference between the 2. Eat and enjoy for a short while in this abode, so that you may be deprived and tormented for a long time in the next. Woe on that day to those who deny. The surah then marvels at the people's stubbornness, even when they are called to guidance, yet refuse to respond. And when it is said to them, bow down, they do not bow down. Woe on that day to those who deny. Despite all the clarity they are given, despite the warnings they are shown, they remain obstinate. So in what message after this will they believe? If they do not believe in this message, which shakes the very mountains, which delivers such powerful tremors, then they will never believe in any message thereafter. Only misery and misfortune await them, leading them to a wretched end, a destruction reserved for the cursed and forsaken. Indeed, this surah, in its very structure, its rhythmic cadence, its violent imagery, and its piercing intensity, this surah is itself an overwhelming force, one that no heart can withstand, nor any being remain unmoved by. Glory be to the one who revealed the Qur'an and endowed it with such majesty and power.